Hi there, it's John Moore here, and I am a shamanic teacher. I teach shamanism, I practice shamanism. I've been doing so for a while, and today I'm going to talk to you about shamanic crisis, or the shamanic crisis, or crisis as it relates to shamanism. And so I'm gonna get a little nerdy with you, and I apologize in advance, but I'm a big fan of Star Wars. It came out when I was a boy, and it was a very formative movie in my youth. And the story of Star Wars, written by George Lucas, follows very closely the hero's journey as it was outlined by Joseph Campbell. And there are a bunch of stages that happen in the hero's journey that are in lots of heroic stories. And I'm going to hit on a few of them, but not all of them, because obviously there are lectures on the hero's journey that go on for days and days and days. And I was going to keep this short and really focused on what I'm talking about today. So I'm talking about shamanic crisis, and this is super important. And it is, in fact, part of shamanic initiation, or it's the main part of shamanic initiation. And so what is it? So I'm going to talk about Star Wars. So in Star Wars, if you haven't seen it, I don't know what planet you've been living on, but Star Wars, you've got the main character, Luke Skywalker. He's a boy. He's living on the farm with his uncle and aunt. He's, whining a lot about not being able to hang out with his friends or whatever. This is life, sort of normal life. And this is the beginning of the hero's journey. And all of these stories in many different cultures, the story of their hero always kind of follows the same path. There's something very archetypal about it amongst human beings. And people who go into shamanism are no different. So he's living at home, chases the robots out into the desert. But at first, R2-D2 projects the message, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope." This is sort of the initial call to adventure, which he ignores. I can't do that. I can't follow you out. I can't go anywhere. I've got all these things. But then something happens that he has to go out. Like the robot disappears and he has to go out. While he's gone, meeting Ben Kenobi for the first time, he rushes back and finds that his uncle and aunt have been killed by stormtroopers. This is a crisis. This is the shamanic crisis that begins his journey. It begins his training on the shamanic path. We could say that Jedi are sort of warrior shaman, right? And this is the same in every culture. And it really is the hero's journey is a parallel to shamanic initiation. In Empire Strikes Back, we see, Luke training with Yoda, and he has to go down into this hole and confront Darth Vader, and he kills Darth Vader, and Darth Vader is himself, and this is about fear. This is about the shadow, but the journey into the underworld, very, very common in all heroes' journeys in all cultures. Also part of, big part of shamanic training and shamanic initiation is journey into the underworld, confronting your shadow, that sort of thing. How does this play out in both indigenous cultures and in core shamanism and that sort of thing? Well, it plays out a little differently depending upon the culture. As I've said in other videos, shamanism is always happens through the lens of the culture that it exists in. So shaman in South America would not necessarily be doing the same thing as a shaman in Mongolia. They're doing similar things, or they're doing a lot of the same things, but in a different way. And obviously they have different languages and different terms for things and that sort of thing. So things play out a little bit. But in many, many shamanic cultures, you have to go through some sort of crisis in order to be chosen, in order to be picked to go into shamanic training. This could be a severe trauma, a severe illness, a near-death experience, getting hit by lightning, not a path I recommend, that sort of thing. There's an important reason for this, and I'll go into that in just a minute. In my life and in the lives of many people I know who practice shamanism, I come from a background of childhood trauma, and I went into shamanism to help heal my childhood trauma, and I was going through crisis. It was my call. It was you got to do this, or you're not going to be okay ever. Um, and it really was the worst period of my life. It was a dark night of the soul kind of thing, where I didn't know if I still wanted to exist, or what have you. And I had small children, and I had to take care of them, and all of these things. Depression, getting diagnosed with PTSD, having panic attacks and flashbacks, and it really is a horrible thing as the result of trauma. But what happens with the crisis, whether that is, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about indigenous cultures in a minute, because there's another kind of interesting thing that happens there. What happens is that it shakes things up. It changes you, because especially when I got into shamanism, like in my very early 40s, um, things are very stable. My life was stable. I had a career, I had a family, I had a house. In order for me to change in the way that I needed to, in order for me to, I had to break apart what I knew, shake things up, dismember myself, so to speak. Dismemberment is another important theme. Getting taken apart and put back together. This dismemberment and rememberment. So yeah, this plays out in a lot of people's lives, in a lot of people's in a lot of various ways. And I know people who have come to shamanism after near-death experiences, car crashes, sometimes as a result of trauma, usually as a result of some kind of trauma, or somebody close to them passing away, or some traumatic crisis in their life. It doesn't always have to be sort of life-ending, life-altering. And certainly there are people who feel drawn to the shamanic path who haven't gone through crisis, and they might or might not become practitioners. Usually not so much. Usually they're not, the calling isn't strong enough if you haven't gone through crisis. That being said, we are in the midst, as I record this, of a global pandemic, which is a crisis on a global scale. And as a result of that, as a result of the trauma that we've all been through, and losing hundreds of thousands of people to COVID, the impulse to awaken shamanically I have seen it grow. I've seen a real interest in returning to these roots and to waking up. I have lots of people contacting me for training and mentoring and healing and all kinds of stuff, way more than before. And I'm a very busy guy. And the reason for that is that the shamanic impulse, which is very archetypal, it exists in all cultures that have hero stories, and pretty much all cultures have hero stories, is a result of crisis. So there's crisis on an individual level, but there's also crisis on a social level. Now, the pandemic is a global crisis. It's a very large social level. And I said I would talk about these indigenous cultures again. And again, this is various, so I'm going to say some indigenous cultures have, if there was a crisis within the tribe, for if there's a tribal indigenous culture, there would be an impulse for one or more people to awaken in response to that, awaken shamanically. I don't mean like I'm woke, or I'm enlightened, or I have ascended and I am now a god or something like that. I just mean to wake up and become a healer, to wake up and become a servant of the tribe. Because ultimately, shamans are servants. They serve people. They serve spirit. They serve the earth. They serve the animals and the plants. So again, this is like, Luke Skywalker, he becomes a servant of the light side of the Force, and he becomes a servant of the Rebel Alliance, and he becomes, yes, he's his own man. He's not a slave, but he serves because it is the right thing to do. Right thing to do. I realize that's a value judgment, but I mean, it is his path. It is the thing that he is destined to do. So crisis has a way of waking us up to our destiny. Now, in some tribal cultures and some indigenous cultures, they will force crisis upon people in ways that seem incredibly unpleasant. They will do, vision quests where they, people are lacking food and water and that sort of thing. And in some Native American tribes have things like the Sundance, where they have, pegs driven through the skin in their chest, and they have to basically tear the pegs out with their body motions. So severe pain, severe, like dancing to exhaustion, starvation, thirst, almost to the point of dying, being put in really harsh conditions. There are a lot of cultures that sort of speed up the initiation process, shall we speak, by by forcing crisis upon the people that are chosen to initiate or have chosen to initiate. In some cultures you have a choice, in some cultures you do not. So this may be a little bit of a warning for people who decide they want to follow the shamanic path. And it's only a warning I'm not trying to warn you away from the shamanic path. But this is a warning in the way of an awareness that you should have that I do not know a single person who has gone through significant shamanic training without having their life shaken up. It has happened to me numerous times during the process. But that being said, I would never give this path up. As hard as those times were, this is right. This is the right thing for me to do. This is my true path. This is my true will expressing itself and practicing and teaching shamanism. It is rewarding beyond finances, is rewarding beyond credit or fame or any of those things that I might have traded for the path of that I'm taking. The spiritual rewards are just too great. Beyond the rewards, beyond the what's in it for me part, when you're on your path, when you find your path and you just follow it to the end of the path, you're in flow with the universe. You're in flow with spirit. You're doing what spirit wants you to do. And so spirit starts to move obstacles out of your way, and the path becomes very easy. It becomes more like railroad tracks than walking through a jungle. It's hard to get off those railroad tracks. It's hard to turn right. But your progress is very speedy, and you're headed in the direction that you're headed in. You can, if you're meant to awaken shamanically, it will happen. I fully believe that. I don't necessarily believe in predestination. You may have a choice about how you handle a crisis. You may study shamanism, or you may get into some other form of spirituality. But again, this impulse, I refer to it as the shamanic impulse to awaken. And that is to awaken to your connection to spiritual life, to divinity, to the natural world, to the fact, to the animistic world with spirits are all around us. So anyway, that is shamanic crisis. I hope that clears some things up. I know this can be sometimes really academic and boring, this part, and I hope that wasn't. And I hope, like, if you haven't seen Star Wars, gosh, go out and see at least the original parts 4, 5, and 6. I know they started out in the middle of the series. 4, 5, and 6 are definitely, the classic movies, and watch it for the hero's journey, and you'll see that is there is a shamanic initiation going on there. I hope you're happy and healthy. Please subscribe to my channel, and I will talk to you real soon.